Welcome to John Teaches Sean About His Brain, the podcast where I, Sean, embark on a journey to understand what's happening in my own head. Spoiler alert, I have no clue, but that's precisely why we're here. In each episode, I explore questions about the brain that I believe will resonate with all of us. Like, why can't I turn my brain off at 3 a.m.? Why my memory only works when it feels like it, and why my brain seems to betray me when I need it most. Listen, I'm not a scientist. I'm no expert. I'm just a guy looking to unravel the mysteries of my own mind. Fortunately, I happen to know a cognitive neuroscientist who is an expert in the brain, and I get to ask him all the questions I want. So, if you're curious, confused, or simply along for the ride, welcome. And hey, if you like what you hear, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to the podcast, or whatever it is you do wherever you listen to podcasts. I don't know how the algorithms work. I just know that your support keeps this journey moving forward. And together, we might just discover something remarkable. This is John Teaches Sean About His Brain. Let's get started. Hi, John. It's good to see you.
Sean, it is great seeing you.
What is on your mind this week?
This week, I was reading an article about the repugnant conclusion. And if you've never heard of that, then we're in the same boat because I'd never heard of it either.
Never heard of it.
So it's from a modern philosopher, English philosopher named Derek Parfit. And he came up with the idea of the repugnant conclusion. And it's based on, and it's actually the article I was reading was reviewing a book by David Edmonds, who was writing his book about Parfit. I think Parfit's recently retired or something. He is from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Okay.
But the idea was, Parfit's idea is that it's about happiness. And he was saying that a massive population living minimally happy lives is much better than a smaller but flourishing population. And he came to that conclusion based on several things, including some mathematic equations and formulas and things. And he didn't like what he came up with, which is why he called it the repugnant conclusion, because he wasn't happy with it. But he said he spent his career, and that's what he came up with. And it's kind of like on the opposite side of this. I think you'll like this because, and you'll have to explain this to me, but the reference was from Marvel movies, from Thanos.
Okay. Yes.
And they're saying pre-2020, Thanos, and this is what they said. So tell me if this is wrong. And I might be misinterpreting what they said because I haven't seen a movie with Thanos. But he said that humans left to their own they don't know how to control themselves and they run out of stuff. And so they need to be controlled. So if he could reduce the number of people living on the planet, then fewer people with more resources is better than more people with fewer resources. Is that close?
So two things, and the listeners are never going to believe this, but you know what, you and I both know the truth. We did not discuss this before we started today, but recording today.
No, I was just reading about this yesterday and this morning.
I am in the middle of rewatching the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe right now. And I'm going on the timeline. I'm watching every Marvel movie in chronological order, not the order it was released. I am right now watching a movie called The Avengers: Infinity War. And that is Thanos.
Okay.
And so Thanos, like you said, he's he's a mad titan. He's a titan, but he goes to planets and he wipes out half the population. Because it's not only humans, this is Marvel, it's made up, but no planet, no creatures on a planet can control themselves. And they'll just burn through all of their resources. So Thanos takes it upon himself to go, and he's merciless, and he doesn't care who the half are. There's no meritocracy. There's no nothing. It is half the population. It's just a random. It's just half of everybody on that planet is going to die.
Wow.
And then he comes to Earth, and he's gonna do that to Earth. So,
okay.
Anyway, well, I'm watching that movie like right now.
Well, now you can watch it with the idea of the repugnant conclusion in mind, because Parfit was saying it's the opposite, that he wanted to agree with Thanos that fewer is better, that fewer people with more resources is better. And then the example they gave, and this was David Edmonds' example, that if you have 1 billion people and there's enough resources where they can all be really happy, and every day they read a philosophy book and play golf, which to him that was happiness, to read a philosophy book and play golf. Sure. He said, or whatever is your happiness, that Parfit was saying that's inferior to 1 trillion people where everybody's just a little bit happy. So having 1 billion people where everybody's really happy and playing, and I'm saying that's the entire population. It's not like 1 billion people are happy and then there's 1 billion that aren't. It's just like the whole population is one way or the whole population is another way. And so they were saying, this gets into things like climate change and global development, poverty policies, things like that we should be, thinking about things. And as I was reading it, because me, I'm always trying to kind of look at everything through the lens of how the brain works, and the on channel and the back channel. I'm saying that's I guess if you guys want to have that thought experiment, you can go down some really interesting roads, I guess. But to me, I can't get past the fact that you're talking about humans, though, and having humans be happy long-term is impossible. So if you have 1 billion people that can read a book and play golf every day and just have high levels of happiness, they aren't going to be happy for very long. And so that's kind of where I was looking at it from, going, wow, this is really different. So I took a different turn on it. And just so you know, I'll throw in a movie. We watched, it was my Father's Day present, not my Father's Day, I got Father's Day present, but for special occasions, whoever is having that special occasion gets to pick a movie or a show or something they want to watch.
I like that. It's a custom.
So my pick this weekend was, I made everybody here, which was Casey and Sierra and Oren, sit down, and what Jonas got out of it, because he's in Virginia with his family. He wasn't back, but we all sat down and I got to pick a movie, and I picked, oh crap. What did I pick? It's the movie of The Matrix. I can't think of the name of it. The Matrix.
Okay.
And so I don't want to spoil alert it for other people, but there's a character in The Matrix named Morpheus.
I think it came out in like 99. I think spoiler alerts are over. I think you're okay.
Okay. Your claim to a spoiler alert has passed. Your statute of limitations is over.
Yes.
That expired. So Morpheus has been captured by
Agent
Smith. Yes.
Yeah.
And Agent Smith is telling him about the world, because the Matrix is living in a computer. Yeah, in a computer.
Yeah, basically. But the real world, he's trying to break him at that point.
Yes.
Mentally trying to break him.
Yes, to get codes to Zion.
Yes.
So he's saying, when we first took over Earth and made humans our slaves and started using their energy to power the machine, and we created this virtual world, the first one we created was to make it where it was just this wonderful, perfect world, and everybody was happy all the time, and it didn't work. And I'm going, that's the way it is. And I don't know.
Yeah.
David Edmonds, I don't know if he hasn't seen The Matrix, but he should know that that's not how humans work. So I was just thinking about the back channel, kind of a pushback from the back channel. And in psychology, so you've heard of hedonism, which is saying that pleasure is the ultimate good, right? So the hedonic principle in psychology states that we as humans have a tendency to seek pleasure over pain or over suffering. And so pleasure seeking is a primary driving force in our human behavior. And then some other researchers came up with the idea of hedonic adaptation. And this was back in like the 1970s, and I think it was Brickman and Campbell in the 70s coined the term hedonic adaptation, because they were saying that when a good event happens, then like happiness spikes and you're really happy. Mm-hmm. But then it slowly starts to drift back down towards a set point, towards a baseline. And that's due to psychological adaptation. So let's say that you just won the lottery. Your happiness level spikes really high, but over weeks and months, it drifts back down. And this is something we've talked about on our podcast already, which is,
I feel like that we did, because I was going to ask a question. I think I asked you the first time, because words matter. When you're saying happy and happiness, my belief around that word, my own, this is just me, but happiness is fleeting. Mm-hmm. You know, and I hear you describing it. It's like it spikes. I just won the lottery. I'm over the moon. I'm through the roof. I'm happy. But then that starts to wane if that's all the input that I have. So mm-hmm. happiness is fleeting. But yep. But contentment, like being content, I feel like that's a good feeling, but that is over a longer period of time. Am I close on any of that?
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really close, because that is a distinction that's made. Something's really similar to that in the literature, because I like the word contentment, and I don't think that might be the word that's used. I can't remember exactly, but that is different than happiness. Happiness is almost in the moment, and you're right. Contentment mm-hmm. is over a longer time, and this is the problem too. Why it's difficult, because happiness is a difficult word to define. And so when people are researching it, anytime you research something, you have to define what it is that you're going to research. You have to come up with a definition of it so it can be studied, and so that other people know what you're talking about when they're reading it, or if they want to replicate your study, they know what you're talking about. So it's really difficult. Philosophers tackle it quite a bit. Psychologists do some, not as much, but people like biologists and physicists and neuroscientists stay away from terms like that, except neuroscientists are now starting to look into the underpinnings of happiness and to see if there's genetic, because some people, there's individual differences. Some people can more easily find happiness than other people, or it can last a little bit longer for some people. Some people see the glass half full, some half empty type of thing.
I always look at it as somebody drank out of my glass.
See, yeah, that's
but it reminds me, what you were talking about reminds me a little bit of Greek philosophy, in that, I've talked about Stoicism before, and the main part of Stoicism, the discipline part, where, whether it's meditation, Marcus Aurelius talking about, being disciplined about food and drink and all the other things. There's another branch of philosophy, from Greek philosophy, Epicurean philosophy, where they're all about like just drink and food and leisure and not working hard. And so I'm probably oversimplifying those two, but I was thinking about the juxtaposition between the two, where, not a lot of materialism in Stoicism. It's do with what you need, versus, mm-hmm. This idea of like, I want as much as I can get, because that's going to make me happy.
Yeah.
And there's that adage, which is where it's misapplied here, but like that money doesn't buy happiness, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. but money does buy stuff, and stuff makes me happy. But
for a little bit, but we talked about it in terms of the brain adapts and survives and can even thrive. And I think before, when we were talking about it, we were talking about the war in Ukraine, how people there, even though they're in bombing situations, they can find happiness and they can live their life and they can thrive. And it's all about, and then somebody, who's middle class, like, how could they never not be happy? But once you're at that point, you start seeing somebody that's at upper middle class, and man, they look even happier. And then when you're upper middle class, somebody who's wealthy, man, they look even healthier. And then they're saying, now that I have all this wealth, I got to figure out how to be responsible. I've got to do this and that. I've got so many responsibilities with work and things. I wish I didn't have money, so I didn't have this responsibility. And it's just, wherever you're at your brain finds a set point. And to me, that's the back channel saying, is this what we're going to be doing a lot now, is living like this? Because if so, then we'll just make this automatic, this feeling, this is our new set point. This is normal. So that, because the brain has to operate from a set of normal, from homeostasis. So if this is where we're going to be now, this becomes my normal. And also the brain doesn't just look at pleasure. The Brickman and Campbell, I mentioned, they followed lottery winners. They also, and saw how it waned over time. They also included a group of paraplegics who had an event that paralyzed them. And they saw they experienced, great sadness and suffering and depression and pain from that. And so they measured both of their happiness levels after an event. And the lottery winners were just, off the charts one way, and the paraplegics were off the charts the other way. But a few months later, when they were measuring them, there was no significant difference between their happiness levels. Even though one group had won all this money and the other group had been paralyzed from an accident, it's basically you kind of learn to live with where you're at, which again defeats the idea of this repugnant conclusion.
Right.
And our brain is just, man, I think it would be cool sometime for us to talk about the pain and suffering seeking aspect of our brain. That might be an interesting topic to talk about, because there's this idea of benign masochism, where we seek out pain and discomfort as long as it's in a safe and controlled environment.
Right. Right.
And I think I might can I call you out on something and just expose you here in front of both of our listeners?
I have no fears of that. No.
You are a benign masochist. I've witnessed it with my own eyes. I've witnessed you involving yourself in benign masochism.
And you'll probably give me an example, because I'm not sure that I.
Well, when you'll remember it, I think it's when I was out there at one point. We were in Burien, and we went to a Thai restaurant, and we sit.
This is what qualifies me as keep going. Go ahead. Okay. I know exactly what you're talking about.
You do know?
I remember. Yeah. Keep telling the story.
So we took the lady who I believe owns it was taking our order, and I ordered my food, and she said, "How hot do you want? How spicy or how
many
hot
stars?
Do you want it?"
I think
1 to 5.
It was a number. Yeah, 1 to 5.
1 to 5. How spicy or how hot do you want it? And so I was like, 3 might be, because 1 is mild, not spicy, and 5 is their hottest. So I was trying to decide between 2 and 3, and I think I said 3. I might have said 2. And she said, okay. She wrote it down, and then she looked at you, gave the order, and she said, how, from 1 to 5, how hot do you want yours? And you said 5, and I went, oh. I just remember looking at you going, whoa, he said 5. I've never heard anybody say 5. I was going, he said 5, because those are like, that's when spicy. It's almost all red chili peppers that you're eating and crunching. I'm going, oh. Yeah. And then it was like like, what are you doing? And then she went, oh, and because you didn't just say 5, you said, but not the white guy level 5.
Yes.
I want level, and I went, oh, because now I'm thinking, and I remember thinking, what are you doing? You're challenging her. And she was like, oh, you think we can't make it spicy enough for you? I was like, Sean, what are you doing? So eating spicy food is an example of benign masochism.
Then I absolutely am. I fall into that category.
But that's painful.
Yeah.
It causes pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you enjoy that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you're right.
That's the masochism spike.
And just to clarify too, because I just keep alienating some of our listeners probably, but listen, a white guy goes into an actual Thai. This is a Thai restaurant. It is a legitimate Thai restaurant, and says, I want a 5. And they bring him out a 5, and it's too spicy, and he complains or writes a bad review or whatever, even though he ordered it. And so I meant no disrespect to her when I said not a white guy 5. I was trying to let her know, hey, if it's too spicy, that's on me. This is of my own doing. You're not gonna hear a word from me if my head explodes.
I
That's
think
what I
she
was trying to
understood
get
that.
And she did. I felt like
Yeah.
we had a little connection there when she went, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
And I'm going to bring you a tie 5.
Yeah, a tie 5.
And not be afraid of you, throwing a tantrum or crying on the floor after we hurt your mouth, which it was hot. And I liked it.
So now you're bringing up something else, another thought to me. So you're saying now that they have to try to discern whether this white guy who said 5, if that should really be like a 4 or a 3 so that he won't complain, go on.
Or hurt himself and blame us.
Yeah,
but exactly.
Or give us a bad review.
Yeah.
Wow, I hadn't even thought of that.
That's just Sean's. I'm not speaking for the podcast or John or anyone else. I mean, I don't want to get off on it. Last thing I'll say on it, but there's a sushi restaurant that we go to that is fantastic, but it's run by a Japanese couple, and they don't speak a lot of English. They're legit. That place is a sushi haven for me. But I go in there and I try to order what's omakase. Give me the chef. Have the chef send out what he wants me to try. And I felt so bad because she had to tell me we don't do that anymore because so many people complained about what we were bringing out to them. So there were, again, people, I mean, I keep saying white people, but just people who go in and screw it up for everybody else. They go in and say, oh yeah, give me the omakase, because they read it on the interweb somewhere.
Yeah.
And then they bring the food out, and then they complain about the food that they're served. So I'm maybe overly, but I'm very sensitive to the idea of like they've dealt with a bunch of people that look like me, and they've been jerks or done stupid stuff.
Who said, give me a 5.
Give me a 5, and then they get a 5, and they're like, this is horrible, it's too spicy, or whatever. So, trying to make them understand, like, hey, I empathize with what you have to go through with people who look like me a lot, and I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
So if you kill me, it's my fault. Don't worry about it. But back to the main point,
good.
You are right. I may be, what's the term again? I want to...
Benign masochism, but I'm not sure yours is benign, because I think of tie 5 as actual just masochism.
I think it might just be straight up masochism. Yeah.
but so this is what I'm saying though about humans and kind of my pushback, because the back channel, there's one other thing I'll just mention really quickly. I know this is probably going too long on this, but
this is great.
Okay, one other thing is there was a study where researchers downloaded an app or had people download an app on their phones that for the study, and I think they had like 2,000 or 3,000 people participate in the study. It was a fairly large number, and at random time, not random times, but at certain times that the researchers had programmed, but the participants didn't know when it was going to happen. But it was during waking hours. Their phone would ding with a notification, and it would say, please answer these like 3 questions or whatever. So it was, one is, how are you feeling? So like, you positive or negative or neutral. What are you doing right now? And is your mind wandering? And then if their mind was wandering, meaning are you thinking about what you're doing, or is your mind wandering? And if their mind was wandering, then they would have to say, are your thoughts you're having pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant? And then they would, and just to see, they just collected data for a few weeks like this. And it turns out that over half or about half the time, not over half the time, I think it was right at half the time, people's minds were wandering. So it's, people are thinking about, because then the other half the time they're going, no, I'm focused on what I'm doing. But about half the time it was wandering. And then most of the time, people's thoughts were negative. And so then you're thinking, well, why are your thoughts negative? And so I think it was their conclusion or some other people, some follow-up research. Did you want to guess why that is?
I don't know why, but if you would have asked me, I could have told you those answers based only on my experience. When I find my mind wandering, it is negative.
Okay.
And I don't know why, though. I really want to hear this part.
Well, so the idea is that it's a type of adaptation that the brain is doing. The brain is one of its jobs. Remember the back channel's main job? Survival, right?
Keep us safe. Yeah. Or survival. Yeah.
Survival
Yeah.
and safety and
Yeah.
survival,
Yeah.
like keep us safe and surviving. So what does negative thoughts have to do with survival? And it's most of the time those negative thoughts are playing out negative scenarios. And so those negative scenarios can have a benefit to survival, not just life and death survival, but social survival and relationship survival and emotional survival, because a lot of the times people, like, the negative thoughts would be things like, what if my boyfriend or girlfriend, or what if my spouse cheated on me? And then you like you play out for a while, like what that would be like and what would I do and what would I say and how would I handle it? And you're thinking, well, that's not very helpful, but it's much better than being just completely blindsided and not knowing what you're. I mean, working through things ahead of time is a form of practice and visualization that helps you prepare for an actual event.
Okay. Because not all the and we've talked about this on the show, so I'm sorry for repeating stories, but it's usually when I'm in the shower, I have a routine, so I'm on autopilot,
Mhm.
and I'm usually about a quarter of the way or halfway into an argument with somebody in my head, that, and I just go, how, what do you do? What am I doing?
Mhm.
Like, why are you, number one, you don't know you're even going to see this person. You don't know you're going to argue with them, but you have all of these point and counterpoint things to say to them. And I try to say, stop it. Try to be in the moment. I try to bring it back, but oftentimes it'll be a couple more minutes and then I'll find I'm back in there.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not. I had started with like a spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend cheating on you, but it's also job loss, expecting that, or conflicts at work, or what if my boss says this or that, or an injury. If I'm injured, what am I going to do? Or
Hmm.
injury or death of a loved one, somebody you know. I mean, there's so many things that can go into it, but a lot of times it's about conflict and what we would do and say. And sometimes that, especially if you know something might be coming, a conflict might be approaching, to run through scenarios in your mind is so helpful, so that your back channel knows kind of what to push forward at the time to help you respond to those situations.
I
So,
mean, I see you're trying to find as always, the positive in this,
well,
but I understand what you're saying about the back channel trying to protect us and set all that up, but it's still in that moment when I'm having those invasive, I call them invasive thoughts, and I
mhm.
got to change that term now, because
Why?
because I feel like that's a really negative term for something that's built
No,
for a
I think
positive
that's an okay.
outcome.
I think that's a great term for
Invasive
invasive thoughts,
thoughts.
because your on channel isn't controlling them.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Because that's just what I call it with
yeah,
myself. But
I like that.
okay. But I do see that I struggle with this so much though, because maybe I'm getting older. I don't know what it is, but I'm really trying to value my time and energy, like
Hmm.
where I put my emotional energy, all of my energy, what I spend my time on. And it seems like the time that I just spent arguing in my own head with someone who's not even here is a waste of that time and energy.
Hmm. So I don't think it is necessarily. Um, I think it's your back channel running through scenarios, and I don't know that that's putting a positive spin on it. I think it's more like it just giving it a purpose. Because if it didn't have a purpose, then why do so many people? Why do we all do it, basically? Because
Yeah.
research
Yeah.
shows that all of us do this, and so there has to be some purpose there. It doesn't mean it has to be, the whole thing behind uh, the idea of us evolving, that we're always evolving to something better, and that's not what evolution's about. We might not be evolving towards something better.
It's
It's more like
adapting,
adapting.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We
So
always use evolution as, like you just said it, like getting better,
we're trying
progressing,
to
and all
reach a
of that.
pinnacle or a point. Yeah.
We're adapt that we have the ability to adapt to these things.
Yeah.
Some things take longer to adapt to than others. I would agree. But yeah, evolving is just adapting to what we're dealing with, right?
So now you see like how my mind goes down trails, because I was just reading an article about this repugnant conclusion that philosophers, and I just went down this whole trail about the back channel, and it's not possible for a billion people to be happy all the time reading philosophy books and playing golf, because our brains won't let us do that.
Yeah.
It has to find that set point again where we're just barely above happiness and things could go wrong at any minute. And that's where we have to live, because that's the way we're wired to live. Because if we weren't, then, 80% of America, maybe not that high, but anybody from kind of lower middle class up should be happy all the time.
You're good.
And
But
we're
can I
not.
just ask you then, let's take a different example, because when you say, upper middle class, I get the analogy, but if a human being becomes a billionaire, they still have a human brain.
Mm-hmm.
So they have $1 billion. They have all the things that go with it. You can make up in your own mind, in your own imagination, what that is: helicopters, yachts, whatever. But they have all of that. But because they have a human brain, they suffer the same thing that
Mm-hmm.
you're describing.
Absolutely. Yep.
And
And then
so they reach up.
they level off at that point. I'm a
Right.
billionaire. I level off at this point. Now I'm back to where I'm just struggling with the balancing, teetering between pleasure and suffering, even though I have the $1 billion.
And I mean, but people like me, people like us, we look at that and go, how could someone like that be unhappy? Why do they keep trying to get more money? Why do they keep trying to, all those things?
Mm-hmm.
But it's because they have this same thing that I have in a
A
human
brain.
brain
Mm-hmm.
that says, here's homeostasis, we're
Mm-hmm.
here. And I'm sure that there is the richest person in the world, but we'll save that. But say billionaires, multi-billionaires, they're still looking at people above them going, they have more than I have, in a
Yeah, and at
sense.
some point, if you're all kind of in the same pool of
Mm-hmm.
wealth, like so this could be even in your, like, let's say in your friend group, or in my friend group, we're all kind of about the same, but then there's so there's maybe money isn't the big differential, so then
Okay.
it's some other things that makes them like, man, they have access to a beach house, or they can go up into the mountains. They've got a friend who has this or that they can just borrow, or they've got a big family, and I couldn't have kids, or there's just different
Right. There's
things that
always something
separate us.
that we're going to find that someone else has that we don't have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So anyway, that's that was
Oh
my
no, I
that's our
listen.
podcast, I think. Thank you
Yeah,
all
I
for
think that's
listening. And
the episode. Thank you, everyone.
but
But well,
could we come back to sometime to this hedonic principle, and maybe go into it more in depth, because there's a lot more to go into than what I just talked
I,
about.
I would prefer, if you're okay with it. We're doing this live. Sorry, but if you want to press on, I mean, you have my attention here.
Yeah.
I'd really like to hear more about it right now.
Okay.
If you if
Okay.
you if you have it.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think.
But I mean, go back to the idea just for a second that because you brought up the Avengers, so that's probably what's like speaking to
Yeah.
me. But even different than that, we're talking about the idea that um, a billion people.
Hmm.
How many people do we have on the planet? Four,
Like 8 billion, maybe.
8 billion.
Well, I don't know. I think
I think
it's
it's four
around.
point three, or is it eight? Anyway,
No, maybe
billions
it's.
billions of people on the planet.
Hmm.
Say billions.
Okay.
And I mean, is it safe? Is it fair to say that we do have a finite amount of resources on this planet?
Hmm.
Now, I'm not saying in the next 100 years. I don't know what the expiration date is, but this planet does have a finite amount of resources to
Yeah.
support that amount of people. That's safe to say.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And we're running out is also safe to say.
okay, I didn't want to be too alarmist, but I mean, we are running out of resources.
Yeah.
So we keep having more people,
It's
but we have
8.2. I just looked.
okay, 8.2 billion.
Hmm.
Thank you for that. And so we have 8.2 billion people. We have a finite amount of resources. And then when you add in this piece about, and I brought up billionaires. I mean, I'm not saying eat the rich here. I'm just saying, how much money or how much stuff does one person. So I'm trying to coalesce this thought, but just bear with me.
Okay.
If you're telling me, and what I think I'm hearing you say, I think I got it right, is no matter how much money you have, no matter how much stuff you have, no matter what you have, you're going to hit homeostasis and your brain is going to be like, you're still not happy. It's still not enough. And so it doesn't really matter how much stuff you have. And then there's people in the world who have virtually nothing, and less than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You brought up Ukraine. There's a whole country of people who are like, I can't imagine what their mental status would be right now, under attack every day,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody in between that. And now you go back to this theory that you brought up, which I'm still hedonistic.
Hedonic
Hedonic
principle.
I don't know why that can't stick in my head. You bring up this hedonic principle,
Mm-hmm.
and what their initial thing was go back to Thanos.
Mm-hmm.
We agree there's a finite amount of resources, so we're going to cut the population. We're going to go down to 4.3 billion. And that will extend the life of the Earth. In theory, my math would say it would double it. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
not, but is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you're thinking about, as long as it's not me and my family,
which is a common thought.
yeah, then
Yeah.
maybe that would be better. But then you think, but that could be, half of my family. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to give up. So it's easy if we think about it. And as Americans, just because we're really isolated by water and land from most of Europe and all, we have this isolationist mentality.
Yeah.
Like it's us and then it's them over there. And so then it's easier to say, well, if half the world went away, that'd be okay as long as America stayed. And that's not the way. I don't think Thanos would buy into that.
No, he's not saving. And again, I know this is a made up comic book character in a movie, but the part of him that I think that they tried to really drive home was it was an objective take. So whether you're a billionaire or you are, like super dirt poor and have nothing, it means nothing to him.
Yeah.
It's a pure numbers game. And so if I get all of the Infinity Stones in this gauntlet glove and snap my fingers, then half of the population goes away. I don't know who it's going to be. It's just
and it doesn't matter who it's going to be.
Doesn't matter to him.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it that way, again, it's like, I'm a billionaire. No one cares. You're gone.
Yeah.
And it changes things. Or I'm an American. As long as America's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that. And if Thanos does happen to show up, which I know he's not real, but if he did, that would be the most fair way to do it. Is the way he's doing it, because it's the most objective way.
It's objective. Yeah.
But we're already doing that. Like you have.
So?
Well, so guess who's talking about maybe living on the moon or moving to the moon or moving as Earth's resources diminish? It's not the common people. It's not people in factories. It's not me and you. It's not those people having those thoughts. It's the billionaires.
Yeah.
Guess who, if you get sick and ill, guess who can get treatment the easiest and the best treatment available?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you need, anything you need, it's already kind of like that in a sense where it's not doled out fairly. And objectively. Yeah.
Fairly.
So it would be, yeah. So I'm not sure. I had a point that I was going to make with that, and I can't think what it is now. But I think that this whole thing about that doesn't necessarily make them happier, though.
That's the key.
That doesn't make them happier, although it can make you feel safer, and so that could be more of the long term feeling of safety. Could be more of the maybe not necessarily contentment you were talking about, but that just a good feeling that I'm safe. That goes a long way towards contentment and happiness, I guess.
I argue that a little bit because the billionaires
Mm-hmm.
have to travel with security teams usually. They have like security around at their estates. They have security around them all the time, and they have to have it. But when you see that much security, doesn't that just remind you how unsafe you are? It should be the opposite, where you go, I have all these guys or these people, I have all this security. But isn't there a piece of your brain that's just every time you see security, you're reminded, oh yeah, I'm under threat all the time.
I think that's right. But then I think there's another level to that, that if that's really bothering me, then I can hole up in my place. I'm not worried about running out of food. I'm not
Okay,
worried about if
fair.
I get a disease or if I get sick or whatever, because I'll have the best healthcare, the best treatments available. So maybe when I'm out in public, I feel less safe, so I choose not to go out in public quite as much. But if I feel uncomfortable in the public, I can stay at home, but my home isn't especially safe,
Right,
safer than any other home. I mean,
right.
and then if I get sick, I hope the hospital that's closest to me, I hope they have a good doctor on call at the moment I go in,
Yeah,
because I can't get the best team. I can't fly a team in or fly to a team of the experts. And so yeah, I think there's a little bit to that, kind of that feeling of safety, overall
safety.
safety.
Yeah,
But then you were talking about like Ukraine and all. My
yeah,
family helped start a mission work over in Haiti, and and it's that's not a bad word. That's not a terrible nation. That's poor people, but they are so kind and so happy. And I know they're portrayed differently because there are bad people in gangs that have, because of their situation they're living in, they're adapting to try to get ahead because people are fighting for food and water. And so there's gangs. And so there's some bad things that happen there in the mountains where we have schools and churches and all. There's it's not like that. It's not taken over and run by gangs. So the people are so kind, so generous, so nice. I don't know how many times Casey and I have commented about how happy they are. It's like they have nothing. And when you're in Port-au-Prince, when you arrive at the airport and you're driving through, we fly into Port-au-Prince and then take a vehicle up into Lavatois. But as in Port-au-Prince, you're driving by and people are making mud cake, literal mud with water that they're eating, trying to survive. They have no food, and people are dying because they're so hungry. There's no food. We have enough food. We have enough wealth and food that everybody in the world could eat, but it's not dispersed.
right.
And so just in America, we have enough resources that we could feed those people. And we would go up to our mission organizations, and they have, in the schools, they have locked up behind padlocks and doors, because people are hungry, so you have to protect it. But big sacks of rice and big burlap sacks of beans that stamped on the front USAID, USAID, because USAID has helped feeding the children over there until now, or not,
Yeah,
because that was taken away, that was cut. So there's no USAID helping give rice and beans to those children for school. And it's like, yeah, so what are we doing? And that's that whole thing about they're still happy. Like even when you talk to them, and even when we send messages back and forth, it's not doom and gloom and this like we'll figure out a way to get by. It's just it's heartbreaking on one side, but it's also like hopeful on the other side. But then for me, I'm thinking of it as their set point changed a little bit, and they're going to adapt to this new set point, and then they're going to be kind of bordering on the pleasure and the suffering, even though to me they're in constant suffering from my
right.
view, because I see how hungry they are and how they don't have. But then I'm also at that same set point where I'm between pleasure and suffering, right there on the balance. And it's like we all are. It's how our brains are wired, and it's crazy on one hand, but it makes sense on the other, because if the brain was wired to not have a set point, then those people would be in constant suffering that there's no relief from. It's weird when you think about, like, why are we wired like we're wired, and just
I was
thinking
just going to
about that at
ask.
times.
So
That's
two things. I'm going to come back to the other one, but first, what does that mean? We're wired that way. What is that part of the brain that you're talking about right now?
that. So this is really what we've been kind of walking around this whole podcast, and it's
Yeah.
the brain principles, how our brains have been evolutionarily developed over, to have these principles, that operate. Our brain operates on principles, and in
Hmm.
fact, that's what I love about when you start learning about science and about everything, about our universe, about the solar system, about our brains, about oceans, how they work, and different ecosystems and forests. It's everything is a system that has rules guiding it, and our brain is just another system that we have rules that our system operates within. So here's an ecosystem in the ocean that has these certain rules, and if you figure out those rules, you understand the ecosystem so much better, and then you can. It's easier to study. It's easier to work with. You know kind of what to expect. You can start. I don't want to say using it to your advantage, but that can be an advantage to you in what you choose to do. Same thing with the solar system, because once we started understanding it and understanding the rules, that's what it's allowed for technology and the satellites in space and everything else. And our brains the same way. Once we start understanding the system, that can help with clinical treatments and all kinds of things. And so it's all about figuring out how the system works. And so the fact that our brain is wired in this way for this system, sometimes it seems crazy, but at other times you think, but what if it wasn't wired this way? It could be really crazy. It's wired as it, I believe it's wired as it should be to help us survive as best we can.
Yeah, and I'm going back to, and there's probably not a more succinct answer to this idea of pain and this kind of tipping point between pain and suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and what part of the brain. I know it's the back channel, and I think that might be it. It's just the back channel is wired to go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's multiple systems in the back channel, multiple
Okay.
structures and systems. So it's
Okay.
easier just to think of it as the back
As
channel.
the
Yeah.
back channel, not trying to pin down just what that one system is, because it's multiple systems are contributing to this.
Yeah. And it's like, because all of those systems uh, run run within the same set of rules and principles.
Right.
So it's like gravity affects everything. It's like that idea that gravity doesn't just affect. It's not just part of a system of rocks that a rock will fall if but it's gravity is a part of our system here on Earth. Everything is pulled towards the center of Earth. So that's kind of the brain. It's wired for all the structures have to operate under these rules,
Rules, principles. Yeah.
principles. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I was going to say, it's now a little bit of time has elapsed, but when you were saying about gangs, and
Mm-hmm.
that, for some very specific reasons, people think of Haiti and Haitians and gangs. But I was thinking about, I was wandering again, even though I was paying attention, but about gangs. And gangs have existed as long as people have existed. Maybe not called a gang, but when you have a group of people who band together who take advantage of people who are, don't have as much money, don't have as much strength, you can say whatever it is. But I think that, and I don't know what that is, but as long as there's been people,
Mm-hmm.
there's been tribes or groups of people who
Mm-hmm.
band together and take advantage of other humans.
Yep.
That's a gang.
Yeah.
And so they've existed in every culture, everywhere. There's been gangs. That's just the thought that came to me.
Yeah. You're right. And this is really interesting. I think that I read this in the book Non-Zero. I'm trying to remember, but it came up with the idea of kind of from a sociological point of view, that as humans, we went from, and I don't remember the terms, the hierarchy of terms, but it was something like, a band, there's like a group, and then a band, and then a tribe, and there were some others, then a chiefdom. And a chiefdom was when several tribes agreed to kind of unite, to work together, and have one person in charge of them, a chief, in charge of multiple tribes. And that was like the most successful way for us to, that was like the most successful point of us living. So that's getting a little ways from gangs, but I'm going to tie it back in. But then as we got larger, because there's no chiefdoms now anymore. We're too big. All societies are so much larger. And so we're outside really size-wise of where we operate most efficiently. Because now, once you get over a certain number of people, to have one person in charge just doesn't work anymore. And if you're smaller than a chiefdom, then it's easy for another group to come and take you over. But a chiefdom can kind of defend themselves, and still everybody works together within that system well. And so they were making the argument, and I think it's in the book Non-Zero, but they were making the argument that that's the kind of what our brains were wired for, and what biologically we're built for is that size of a grouping. And now, society, you can't go back to that. I mean, unless Thanos appears, and then we're all fighting again. We'll see. But you can't really go back to that. But that's also
chiefdom is small enough that one person can oversee those people effectively. But big enough that another group can't come in and take over.
Yeah, and I don't remember the size, but that was like, yeah. So there's where you're the safest, and so you're the safest and the happiest, so to speak, I guess. I don't think they use the word happy, but you're all, your role, you get along, you fit in, you believe in the one chief, and then, it's just kind of like you fit in that system the best. Humans fit in that system the best was the argument. And then when it's smaller, they were given the problems that come up if you're smaller than that. And then if you're larger than that, like we are now, there's another set of problems with that. So that's just an interesting way to look at it, because a chieftain would protect you from gangs. If you're smaller, gangs can affect you. And if you're larger, gangs can affect you. Because now I'm in something bigger than a chiefdom. Now I don't have the oversight, and gangs can come in and rule. And it's hard to like how difficult is it to get rid of drug cartels and things like that and gangs? It's just, we're so big that they can operate within the system because the system is so large.
Right. Too big. So big enough that no one is going to try to take over America, but too big to effectively have one person rule effectively. I'm not saying overthrow the government. I didn't say that.
No,
I didn't say that.
No, but you said one person take over America, and it's like, I was going to let that
go. That was a slip of the tongue, or maybe I was going to let that Freudian go, slip. Yeah.
No, but you're right. And so, and I guess in the case of Haiti, it's they're also still too big, and they lack the central organization of a chiefdom, because man, I should find that book and those numbers. That was a fascinating point, and I can't remember. It's been so long ago since I've read it. But
I've
anyway,
never heard this before. This is really interesting to me.
Yeah, there's a certain.
I had read something and I couldn't cite it, but talking more about cavemen. Trying to think of the proper term for them, but that the perfect number of a tribe was 130. That was and I'm not saying that's the number for a chiefdom. It was just anything bigger than 130 was too big.
It's hard to feed, find food, and hard to, yeah.
Or it's organize them, feed them, keep them safe. Anything above 130 was too much.
That's interesting, yeah.
But it sounds very similar to what you're describing.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
So, Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say then their back channels, because I'm going to get back to, I was just getting back to that, but their back channels finds that point too between pleasure and suffering, even though that's the most ideal. That's probably where the set point is at its most ideal as well. But then if you go in different directions, whether you're being, you're fighting oppression, or whether, the other way around, you're still going to find that set point. Your
We all
brain
have
is.
it. Yeah. Because we all have brains.
Mm-hmm.
They're all going to operate the same. And that's the message. I know in this episode, I bounced all over the place. But what when we talk about empathy and understanding and all of that, the hardest thing sometimes to do is to empathize with people who we believe have it better than us.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, my belief is that they need it just as much, if not more, than we do. And so it's important for me to remember, and that's what I globbed onto, if you take the Avengers and MCU out of it. But what I really like attached to is this idea that I forget, I'm guilty of this. I see a billionaire and they're still trying to get more money, create more things, build their empire, do all these things. And it's like, why do you need to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm guilty of forgetting that the billionaire has a human brain just like mine. And that where I'm at, wherever that might be in life, upper middle class, whatever it is, that there's still this pain and suffering tipping point that we're all going through. So you look at homeostasis, the brain kind of goes, is this where we're at? This is where we're at. We're in a mansion with a helicopter on the roof, whatever. This is where we're at. And then we go back to this idea of like still not being happy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're happy but not content. That was important to me to make that distinction, but still not content. Mm-hmm. And for other people like me to rail again, to get upset about that, because you made a comment, and again, I feel like I'm all over the place, but I feel like I can pull this together at the end to say we have the resources that, if done correctly, no one in this world would have to starve. There wouldn't be a kid eating a mud pie.
Mm-hmm.
But we might not have billion. I don't know what that would look like, but I mean, we do have the resources for that to happen. So I get angry about that.
Yeah.
And it's that in that place right there where I, shake my fist at the sky and, why do you need more?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying it might be a little bit better for me and for us, all of us, to remember that the people that we're talking to, that we're talking about, that we're dealing with, are all human beings with human brains, and they all work very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not the same, but they're pretty darn similar.
And they're based on the same principles.
That's what I was going to just say. I wanted to end with no matter how they're working, they're all falling under the same set of principles.
Yes. And then if you under that set of principles, if you travel down one road long enough, that's rewiring your brain to adapt to that new, the homeostasis for that new point. But that changes your thinking. So you could start out without being a billionaire and see the world one way. And then when you become a billionaire, what are you going to say? You're going to say, well, the other people who aren't billionaires just don't understand. Now I have these and I have to do that. I have to do these things, and people are counting on me to make more. So there's the justification, but it's also because now you're seeing your world differently because of your experiences. And so I think you're right on all of that, that we should remember that no matter who we're talking about.
It's not easy. It's a daily struggle for me, but I'm trying.
If you only have just a little bit of empathy to give, though, give it to the poorer people.
Absolutely.
But if you have enough, then just spread it to everybody, every human. Give empathy to every human.
I don't know that I have any left over at the end, but if I do have any, I want to give it to some people that I think might need it the most. And that's, not always who you think it is.
No, that's true.
some people with some bad behavior, bad thoughts, bad actions. They're humans too, whether I want to acknowledge it or not. And
That's true.
And they need some grace every once in a while. So
absolutely.
Boy, so two things, John. This is not what this is not the topic that I sent you we were going to talk about.
Nope.
So I'm sorry about that. But once we got rolling on the opening, I just didn't feel like I could let it go. So thank you.
No, that's great. I mean, that's adapting, right? You adapted the show.
Adapted on the fly, and I'm very happy I did.
Good. Yeah. It kept both of our neurons firing, which is the goal of this.
Did it, because, again, if I got too, I don't want to say preachy, but if I got too preachy on some of these things, I'm sorry, but these are the thoughts that I have, and I try to, if we look at this podcast, it's about how the brain works, and I think I pat myself, I think we do a good job tying it back to the brain, but, we've done an episode on emotional intelligence. We talked about empathy, some of these things, and it's not just things I say. I'm passionate about these things in myself. I'm trying to be better. Right. I'm not trying to change anybody else, but if anybody listens to this podcast and gets something out of it in that regard, I would feel like we've accomplished something. So
agreed.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if you did find something useful in this episode, like I say every week, is tell a friend, tell a coworker, just anybody that you think would get something out of this, share it with them. Follow us on our socials. We're on TikTok, YouTube. I say it every week, but John, I was looking at your TikTok today, and your account is amazing.
Thanks.
It really is. Every time it comes up, I'm just like, man, you're doing a good job on this. And so, check out John's personal TikTok, the show's TikTok, at John Teaches Sean, and like this, subscribe to it, follow it, whatever the metrics are that change the algorithm to keep us or make us kind of move up the charts. That would be much appreciated. And yeah, I already thanked John, but I'm thanking him again. And if you're listening, thank you. And we will see you next week.